Welcome to the Great Basin Smoke Dispersion Briefing for February 22nd. This is Gina McGuire. Over the last week, we've had more precipitation over parts of Idaho, Nevada, and into the Sierra with a storm last week, pushing some areas above normal. However, very dry conditions still continue over southern Nevada into the southern half of Utah and into parts of southeast Idaho. Looking at the water vapor satellite image for today, we have now high pressure dominating off the Baja Peninsula, and this ridge of high pressure will move east across the Great Basin, keeping dry and relatively warm weather across the area through much of this week. Now looking at the ventilation index for today, we'll still likely have good dispersion over the eastern two-thirds of the Great Basin, with northerly to northwesterly winds, still somewhat breezy on the east side of the ridge. However, over far western Nevada and the Sierra into California, we see much more poor dispersion with the weaker winds underneath the ridge of high pressure. Looking at the individual components of the ventilation index, the transport winds on the left show these breezier winds in the oranges and purples over the eastern half of Nevada into southern Idaho and Utah, and very weak winds over the far western side of the Great Basin. Also, mixing heights will remain relatively low over western areas and much higher as you move further south and east. If we move into Tuesday, this ridge of high pressure starts to move slightly further east, allowing for warming temperatures through this week. However, again, as the ridge moves eastward and winds decrease, we'll see poorer dispersion move further east across much of Nevada as we move through Tuesday. Looking at the individual components again, you can see the winds have decreased significantly across much of Nevada, but are still breezy over the southern portion of Nevada into the southern half of Utah, and over parts of southwest Idaho, where mixing heights are a little bit higher. If we look further into the week, moving on into Wednesday, this ridge now moves over much of the Great Basin with much lighter winds and much lower ventilation indices across all areas. Looking at the individual components once again, you can see the significant decrease in wind in all areas on the image on the left, and also mixing heights are relatively low in most areas despite the warm temperatures. There will be plenty of valley inversions as we move through the middle of this week. Looking at the Utah Forecast Clearing Index, you can see the clearing index also decreases significantly across Utah as we move through the week, especially towards Wednesday, and those winds decrease under the ridge of high pressure. Looking at the overall forecast amount of precipitation over the next few days through early Thursday morning, the only precipitation we'll likely see will be across parts of Utah, especially in the higher elevations, and this precipitation will be on the lighter side. Looking later in the week, by Thursday and Friday, this ridge of high pressure moves east across the Great Basin, and this will bring our warmest temperatures of the week, with highs reaching up to 15 degrees above normal, and many valley locations reaching the 60s to low 70s. Dry conditions will also continue through the end of the week, and as the ridge moves eastward and light winds will continue across the Great Basin, we'll see poor dispersion, with the exception of far southern Nevada, where mixing heights will be a little bit higher with somewhat breezier northeast winds. By Friday, the ridge starts to move into the eastern side of the Great Basin and allowing for some southwest winds to increase over parts of western Nevada into southwest Idaho, and this will allow the ventilation index to increase somewhat but still remain relatively low. By Saturday, we have a weak system that moves across the northern portion of the Great Basin. It'll still keep relatively light winds with the exception of parts of the Sierra, so we may see a little bit higher ventilation indices over the Sierra by Saturday, but still relatively poor dispersion in most other areas. We also may see some light precipitation by Saturday and Sunday across parts of Idaho and Wyoming. By Sunday, another ridge moves in, and this will bring another round of light winds and poor dispersion across the eastern side of the Great Basin, with another area of low pressure now approaching off the northwest coast later in the weekend, which will bring increasing south to southwest winds over the Sierra and western Nevada, which will increase the ventilation indices in those areas. Looking at the overall amount of precipitation through early Saturday morning, only very light precipitation might start moving into the far west side of the Great Basin. However, most of the precipitation will move in later on Saturday and through Sunday, and mainly across far northern Nevada into Idaho. Looking at the longer range outlook into the first week of March, we'll likely continue to see these well above normal temperatures continue with below normal precipitation. That concludes our briefing for today. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Thank you for listening.